Shalom, shalom, larachok v'lakarov. Shalom to those who are near and far, and welcome. I'm glad that you're with us. I just got back a little bit from United Synagogue Convention or convening, which was lovely. I got to hear a beautiful song from Rabbi Yosef Goldman performed, the Nancy's son-in-law. And but I'm gonna jump right in. And tonight I've gotten a little bit of feedback, just a little bit, that people prefer if we do the talking and sharing of how we're doing at the end, so then people who don't want to do that can jump off. And so instead, we'll start with a bracha that Suzanne has put in the bottom, in the chat. Join me in this bracha, and it's at the top. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And I also almost think la'asok b'divrei political science, since a lot of what we're doing tonight is a basic intro primer to those of you who forgot your intro to political science that you took in college oh so many moons ago. So I said we're not going to talk about how we feel, but we should at least say hello. So if we could go and just say your name and Mashu Tov, Hakarata Tov, Mashu Tov. So my Tov thing is that I got to be with 700 or so other Masorti conservative Jews for the last 2 days. Edna and then Ron.
Hello, Edna. Something good. Oh, a grandson of a friend of mine was released from Gaza.
Amen.
Which is a tiny piece of light, and the rest we'll see.
Okay, so Ron and Myra. Your name and something good.
Ron Schneider, something good. I excuse, my sister's not here. She's visiting my daughter, and having the two of them hanging out together for a few days is a great joy for me. So thank you.
Wow. Amazing. So his sister is Laura, who comes to shul all the time, Laura Sucher. Okay, Myra, then Michelle and Stephen.
I'm fine, and I'm looking forward to a wedding in our family with my children this weekend. So I will be away from the Jewish Center in Tucson.
Great. So Michelle and Stephen, and then Debbie Friedman. And the question is just like your name and something Tov, good in the world.
Michelle Alprin, Aliza and I had a great time at the Jewish Center's craft fair, and people loved her work, so she was happy.
Amazing.
And she makes money off of it.
Yeah.
Even better. So Debbie Friedman, then Moshe. Name and something good in the world.
This Sunday we'll be celebrating one of my great grandnephews. That was a double pronoun, a double adjective. Sorry, my grandnephew who will be turning 7.
Moshe and then Mike. Moshe, you are mute, and I know you have something to say.
Okay, Moshe Margolin, and I'm really pleased that the Israel and Us committee has gotten off to a great start. We're going to meet next week again to discuss future stuff, so that's great.
Yafa. Mike Rosenthal and Nancy Lewis. Name and one good thing, just one. Mike, unmute, please. We want to hear Mike's good thing. Okay, Mike.
I'm working on my Hebrew and it's coming along nicely.
Amen. Nancy Lewis and then the Richmonds.
On Sunday, our little 18-month-old granddaughter Eliana spent the day with us, and it was terrific.
Nice. So the Richmonds and then Hazel.
Hi, I'm Judy Richmond, and I just got an email from my daughter that has an attachment, well, you can't see, of 2 paragraphs in Hebrew that are written by my 11-year-old grandson, Yonatan. And it begins, Hashana Hamishpachat Sheli. This year, my family and my daughter tells me I have to read it because my husband and I have committed a crime in this story. So we need to know about the crime.
Amen. Now we're going to do the other Richmonds, then Hazel. I don't know if you guys are related, but we're all one Jewish mishpacha. So, Alan, Richmond.
We are very happy. Our grandson Matthew is going to come visit us on Thursday.
Nice. Now Hazel, then Sally.
My grandson came down on Saturday and stayed till Sunday with his latest girlfriend. And that was a nice visit.
Amen. Sally, then Bob Schwartz.
Tommy Tuberville decided not to block promotions with the armed forces, and I'm Sally Steinberg Brent.
Amen. Bob Schwartz, then Jane LaGrange.
I'm Bob Schwartz, and I'm looking forward to spending Hanukkah with my grandchildren.
Amen. Jane, then Mindy. Jane, we'll get Jane when she gets back. Mindy, then my friend Kim.
Hi, Mindy. I have a good excuse to bake some cakes and cookies because Hanukkah's coming up and other people will eat them.
Give you my address. Great. So Kim, so something good. This is my friend Kim from my previous shul, but now she comes to us sometimes too, and a dear friend.
I'm grateful to be here, and I'm grateful to be on the Zoom with Judy Shapiro, who reminded me to be here.
Nice. Although I don't see Judy. Oh, she's on the next thing. Okay. Ellen Pristak and then Eleni.
I'm Ellen Pristak, and I'm very proud of my granddaughter, who's a freshman at the University of Arizona and has been in performing arts since she's a little girl, was just cast in the University of Arizona's play this spring. And she's a freshman, which was a surprise. So we're proud of her, and she'll be here. She's coming home on Thursday, and her sister Eliza, and Eliza's boyfriend Paul will be at Shabbat Under the Stars Friday night.
Amen. Eleni.
Well, Neil and I got to see Lou Gant work at the Kelsey Theater on Saturday night, and that was great fun. And my first cousin once removed, just had a little baby girl. So we can't wait.
Janet, then Judy. So your name and one good thing of your week.
Janet Cohen, and we just arrived down here in Florida. We're here for the winter now.
Oh, I'm happy to come visit. Frozen chosen. Okay.
Anytime. You're very welcome.
Judy Shapiro, then Lucy. Judy, unmute. Judy, you're still mute. Okay, good.
Thank you. Well, Kim took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say I'm thrilled to be here with you, Rabbi Murrow, and with Kim, and it feels like old home night here.
Nice. Good. Lucy, you around? Nope. Suzanne Esterman.
That's me. The cool thing about my week, I found out today that apparently I'm hosting a Latke Candle Festival on Friday night. My younger son said, I'll be by for the Latke Candle Festival on Friday night. I can't say no to that.
You cannot. Great. Wonderful. Oh, I have one good thing, which is that my young 31-year-old nephew proposed to this lovely woman that he's been seeing, and we will have a nice family simcha.
Great.
She said yes. So good. Amen. 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 I hope I get to do the wedding with her, Rabbi. We'll see. Okay, so we're going to begin, and I don't know how many of you, were any of you able to see Danielle's lecture before? Okay, so we're going to start together. And I have the text in front of me. Does everyone have the text in front of you, or do you need Suzanne to drop it in this chat?
I have to drop it in the chat.
Okay, and we're going to go to definitions of categories. And before we even go to definitions of categories, I'd like to know if there are any political scientists on the Zoom tonight. Anyone who studied political theory or science as an undergrad? That'd be me.
As an anthropologist, political science adjacent, I think they would say.
Yes. Yeah, right. Exactly. So before we go to the actual document, I'd love to ask the question. Here's the question. Do you consider us, the Jews, a nation, a people, a religion, a what? And I don't want you to argue with someone else. This is just what you think when you think of the Jews. So someone jump in.
All of the
What
above.
we're talking about tonight is nationalism.
All of the above. I agree. All of them.
So for Ellen, it's say what the above were.
We are a people. We're a nation. It's a religion. We're a culture. And a very important people.
I would say a religion and a people. I don't know about a nation. And historically, Jews were considered a race, by the way.
So we have some of the historical piece that actually led to getting us into some of the anti-Semitism that we experienced. That's interesting to note that. And we also note that there's a bit of a difference here. And we'll be trying to figure out what does it mean to be a nation, and when did this idea of nationhood or peoplehood come into being? Okay, Mishu Acher, someone else? Edna?
It's interesting because for me, I would say the first response, a nation, since for me it includes also being people and ethnic group and religion and so forth.
Okay. Anyone else want to add before we actually go to some of the Hartman Institute's definitions? Yeah, Dr. Langer.
Well, I would say with respect to those for whom it's a nation, for me, it's more of a people and a religion, because a nation is a political entity for which one ideally votes for the leaders, etc. And even though there is such a nation, I'm not in that nation.
Okay. So we now, Eleni?
Yeah, I find it hard to answer the question because I have to make so many conditions and put it in historical context. And
correct.
So I sort of can't say anything on one foot so fast, because I think it really depends on what we're talking about, and we might all be using these words in different ways. So maybe that's what we're going to get into.
So let's go to page 1, definitions. These are the definitions that were supplied by Hartman, but generally the ones that folks in the realm of thinking about political science and Judaism, the Jewish people, modernity, Zionism, think about. So does everyone have that first page where it says definitions of categories? And the reason we're going over these categories now is that they're unclear to some people. And also, I will venture a guess that even when we're done thinking these through, not all of you will agree on what the sense of Jewish nationalism actually is. Okay, so could somebody read the first definition of what nationalism is? We're going to read it, then we're going to discuss it.
I can read it. I have it on my computer.
You. Great.
Nationalism, advocates for loyalty, devotion, identification to, with one's own nation, and support for its interest, including the prioritization of some of these interests over those of others. It views a sovereign state as a morally legitimate and necessary political framework wherein members, citizens distribute to each other goods and pursue, protect, and promulgate their identity, values, and culture.
It's a mouthful. And
Yeah.
yet, what are the elements of this definition? It is talking about how we are, and this is in Danielle Hartman's language, bound to each other and encumbered by each other, his wording, encumbered to be committed to do things for the other. Did any of you see the after video with Dr. Giltroy and Masua Sagiv? So Dr. Giltroy, even though now he lives in Israel, is actually a professor at McGill of American history and American presidents. And he has this great line about how you can be driving through New York State in the north of it, and you keep driving and you keep driving, and all of a sudden, the money is different. The healthcare you would receive is different. The taxes are higher, and you are not part of the same nation. Somehow, we've been able to put together ways of feeling like we are bound together, and their word encumbered, meaning having obligations to one another. How do we get that sense of feeling connected? What are the mechanisms to our anthropologists and our sociologists? What are the methods that make, okay, before the 1600s, we weren't really hanging out here on this piece of land. And then the 1700s happened, and then there was a civil war in the 1800s. What device is used to create a national identity? So it's about our stories. And we're going to go through in just a little bit what the stories of the Jewish people are that help us to create a sense of either peoplehood, or at the end of the 1800s, a move towards nationalism, a move to take that sense of peoplehood and move it in the direction of nationalism. Okay, anyone want to add anything to this definition of nationalism? I'm going to skip fascism because I'm not sure it's going to help us much in our conversation, except to say it embraces the exalting of one nation or race and uses it to discriminate against others. Interesting, right? We've certainly felt that. Okay, ethnicity. Could the anthropologist read that one for us?
I guess that would be me.
Yeah, that's you.
Relates to a population subgroup founded on a narrative of a common and shared origin, history, language, religion, and culture.
That works.
Does it work for me? Not really, but I just I appreciate what Hartman is trying to do to give us some working definitions.
Okay.
But I think it's more complicated than a narrative.
Okay, well, how would you
that's
complicate
okay.
it?
What?
You're right. They have to give us something to work with, but
Yeah. But we might have a lot of different narratives and still feel part of an ethnic group or part of our
so
group.
that's
Even like those of us here probably have any number of different narratives about all kinds of things related to our community as Jews and so on.
absolutely. And so that's why I think the next piece will give us some sense during this Christmas season that is upon us. The season of light is not really Hanukkah, we know, but is all the Christmas lights. So what it means to be an ethnic minority within this nation. So could you read now the ethnic nationalism?
You want me to read it?
Yeah, because I think what it does is it takes both of these and complicates this narrative a bit.
Sure. So ethnic nationalism, he's defining as legitimizes and advocates for the formation of nation states around members of a particular ethnic majority, despite the presence of other ethnic minorities living within it. State is owned by the ethnic majority, which is defined independently from the state and predates it.
Okay, so what this definition I believe works for, maybe, is maybe the state of Israel. Not sure it works for the United States, although I might think that if I were a right-wing Christian, a right-wing conservative Christian, that this definition might work for me. Because it's about the ethnic nationalism of the United States being a Christian country. How many of you believe we live in a Christian country? Yeah. Even though we know there is a supposed separation of church and state, even though we know there are all kinds of rules to protect ethnic minorities in our state, in our country, in our nation, and that I am part of this nation, I am somehow still an ethnic minority, as are you, unless you define yourself out of that. What would be interesting for all of us is to meet a German Jew in the 1920s and then in the mid-1930s to see how they saw themselves as German and as part of the ethnic majority or ethnic minority. Anyone have anything they want to say or add? I'm just yes, Suzanne.
I thought ethnicity had more to do with background and heredity than this is giving credit for. Am I misled?
So here's the thing. We know that it's a yes and, right? Because there's always adoption. It's not necessarily heredity. It is also the ethos of the group of people. So some of that comes from what people look like, right? But more of it comes from their culture. Okay, we're going to go to Mike. Did you want to say something? Mike? No?
I think Lucy has her hand up.
Judaism has taken a large part in the formation of America, because the Christian people that founded the country, although Jews helped, the Christian people were very much involved in the Old Testament, and Jewish ideas from the Declaration of Independence on down to the inscription on the Liberty Bell claimed liberty throughout the land and through all the inhabitants thereof.
Right, but they did that as Christians. I give you your first point that there were plenty of Jews involved, certainly in financing the Revolutionary War and in the formation, and yet we still are a minority. We're a minority culture, and certainly anyone who lived through, if anyone went on the civil rights trip here, anyone who lived through that time in Jewish history, in American history, knows that it wasn't just Blacks or coloreds who couldn't be at a water fountain in a large portion of this country or certain motels or country clubs, but also Jews.
Oh, I agree.
We were ethnic different. Okay, I'm going to Ellen and then I'm going to continue on so we get to text.
I just wanted to comment on what you said about the German Jews. That was one of the issues when, as Hitler came about, many of the German Jews saw themselves as German nationals, not necessarily Jewish, and couldn't face the fact that Germany was turning against them. They fought in World War I, they won medals, and they consider themselves more German than Jewish. And it turned out not to be the way they were seen.
By some.
By
Right.
some, yeah.
Or by those in power, by those who rose to power,
Exactly.
those who
Exactly.
in a fascist way took power. Okay, let's do the civic nationalism, individualism, and globalism, and then get to actually Torah. So could somebody else read civic nationalism? Although we love Eleni's reading, because she probably had great reading teachers in high school. So civic nationalism. Thanks, Mindy. Dr. Langer.
Civic nationalism legitimizes or gives preference to nation states formed around the inhabitants or citizens of the state in which they live, regardless of their ethnic origin and/or majority or minority status.
Okay, that should make all of us feel a little more comfortable. And also should make thinking about a state of Israel that encompasses Jews, Christians, Muslims, Baha'is, Sikhs, atheists, all kinds of religions, feel also a little bit more able to think about. Civic nationalism. Okay, individualism, I think that we don't really need to talk about that. We all deal with the individual who can't, the idea of, you know, it's just me, it's just you. But I think globalism will be a really interesting one to think about. So globalism.
A view which sees the boundaries and interests of nation states as arbitrary and or morally problematic, and which advocates for bonds with individuals and groups around the world on the basis of their individualism or an identification with their socioeconomic, cultural, gender, and ideological positions and concerns.
Okay, so how many of you consider yourselves a globalist?
Isn't it true that by that definition, anybody who lives here but supports Israel, for example, is being globalist? You're not saying that's not my country, I don't live there, I live here.
Only for you, Mindy, because when you had your definition at the beginning, you said, I don't belong necessarily to that nation that is Israel. Masua Sagiv, who is the lecturer to do the post lecture after this that you can go and listen to on the Hartman site, speaks about how what is so interesting and different about the nation state of Israel is that it is not only it was founded as and continues to be the nation state of the Jewish people, which is why people on all sides of the political spectrum in America and in Australia and in England and wherever we are feel like we have a say in what happens in Israel. How many of you feel that when Israel does something very good, it reflects upon you? And how many feel the opposite? When Israel does something very bad or questionably, morally questionable, it reflects upon you. Yeah. That is what complicates that relationship of defining what it means to be part of the Jewish nation or the Jewish nation state. Like Mindy says earlier, half an hour ago, I don't live there. And so we could claim it's not ours, just like if I were an Irish Catholic living in Philadelphia. Actually, the congressperson for where I used to live is this incredible Irish Catholic man, one of the biggest Zionists I've ever met, Brendan Boyle. And now I asked him in the past, like, do you identify with Ireland? And he looks at me like, what? It's like I identify with cultural aspects, but he's removed enough from there. I, on the other hand, have never lived in Israel for more than, a year at a time, but I still consider myself tied and connected. So it's a different way of having this nation state. The nation state of the Jewish people is not the same as the nation state of the United States, which is also quite complicated, as we know, and continues to be complicated. And we're going to see it become more complicated in the next presidential election as real questions about what democracy will look like will happen at the next election. It's not theoretical questions anymore, but real questions about what it means to live in this particular democratic country that we all love. I think we all love. I think we're all proud, patriotic Americans. Yeah. Okay. So I'll make one little side comment, which is that Judy Shapiro's here, and I hope to someday get to vote for her son for president of the United States. I hope that day will come in our lifetime that we'll be able to vote for Josh Shapiro someday. And I will help in the New Jersey district and take a political stand there. Okay, unparentheses. Oh, Judy, you had a question or a comment?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for that. Just two things. Just hit
As
me.
Judy often mentions, I was there at his first race.
That's right. That's right. And got dibs on the Lincoln bedroom. But the two things hit me, and I don't know if anybody else is feeling this. One is the whole idea of the labeling kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies, like looking at like long-term Jewish history and the Jew hatred that came from these different labels. And even, you know, with Trump doing his thing about, you know, when he was angry at Jews because they weren't loving him more for what he did for Israel, it just seems like these labels have had a real downside. I don't know why I feel kind of like anxious as we're having this conversation. And the other thing that keeps hitting me is, what would this course have been like if we started it in September? And you know, how, or you know, before that.
Well, right. Yeah.
It seems like everything is sort of changed now, and changed how people view that, and view that whole communal feeling of being a Jew and everything else. I don't know. I mean, obviously we can't go back.
Right. Except Judy, I chose this curriculum in July when I was
I know.
and I chose it because we were all having conversations about what Israeli democracy would look like. We're still going to have those conversations, right? It won't be, it's not going to be in the middle of a war, but certainly there are lots of people who question what was going on in the government of Israel for the last, right, many months. That conversation went on hold. By the way, the court case against the Prime Minister Netanyahu started again yesterday.
Yesterday.
Oh.
So certainly Israel put it on a pause for a little bit. But yeah, the reason I chose this curriculum was because I wanted us to be thinking about what does it mean to live in a democratic Jewish state?
But this is an issue since the beginning, since 48, just in parentheses.
Yeah,
Not
no,
just
explain more, Edna, but yes, exactly.
I just wanted to
Wait,
say.
wait, hold on one second. Hazel, 1 second. I want to
sure.
Edna finish and then Hazel, and then we're going to go to.
I mean, I will say it very briefly. Since 48, as we know, the scroll of independence raised the same problematic issues, not having a constitution, the dilemma of who is a Jew and what is a Jew, the idea of nationalism, so many loops and holes in the pragmatical view of Ben-Gurion to establish a state and to create a status quo is not solving legal issues till these days. So,
Nachon, I want to respond to that one of the texts we read last week, Auto Emancipation, and also the Herzl piece spoke about having a nation state would be the salve, the way to solve the tragedies of the Jewish people. And they wrote this in the 1880s because of the pogroms that were happening to Jews everywhere. And they knew in 1948, when they wrote in Tel Aviv that document, that they weren't all going to be Jews, but that they were going to be a majority Jewish population. And that's where you get this idea of civic nationalism. Not everyone's Jewish. Okay, Hazel, you were next. Thank you, Edna.
Well, I was just thinking about the Irish, your question before. with the Irish, there's Irish Catholics. So I think if Ireland were attacked, people would feel, people who were of Irish descent would be concerned. Or if the Catholics were all, but we have the distinction of being a religion which has been persecuted, and our group has gone all around the world, and what holds us together at all is our Jewishness and other people's attitude toward Jewishness. So, I mean, just as in Germany, the Jews became very assimilated, and probably had it continued, their Jewishness would have really disappeared. But we've been kind of, in a way, held together a little bit by the feeling that we are other, in a way.
We are
And I don't think
persecuted
that's
under-
true of people from other countries.
I don't, I
If you're
think
French or you're Irish, you're not
no,
in
well,
the
I
United
think it,
States.
listen, I think it is true as a student of American history, it was a big deal in the United States when a Catholic became president.
Right.
This country didn't see Catholics as part of the Christian establishment of the country. They weren't Puritans. They weren't mainline Reformed churches. And it was, I wasn't living, but when Kennedy became, you tell me, Kennedy became the first Catholic president, it was a big deal, right? Okay, Janet Cohen, and then we're gonna go to Genesis.
Well, just to address that, so I remember my mother saying people were concerned that his allegiance would be to the Pope.
Right. Yeah.
That was
Well, yeah. Okay, so let's go to Genesis, because now we're going to go and think about how our identity is formed. But I'll also say, as one last comment back to Hazel, one of the things you bring up is so interesting, because now we have 75 years of Israeli history, and we have Jews living in Israel who consider themselves Israeli, but don't necessarily identify with much in Jewish religion, but consider themselves fully Israeli. Now, what they'll learn later in their lives is that a lot of what they consider to be Israeli comes from Jewish culture, but not all of it. Some of it is just because of the nation state. Okay, so let's go, and we're going to go through these sources rather quickly, because there's a lot of them. Someone read Genesis 1:26 to 28. We have a reader. Judy Shapiro, looks like you're ready to read. Thank you.
And God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. They shall rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the cattle, the whole earth, and all the creeping things that creep on earth. And God created man in his image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, be fertile and increase, fill the earth and master it, and rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and all the living things that creep on earth.
Okay, foundational text, not just for us, but for all of humanity. We think it's our story, our foundational text of humanity. And what does it teach us about our relationship with all others?
We're all brothers.
Yep, well, or sisters. Yeah.
Or sisters, right.
Or today, some people don't use gender, so we're all siblings in some way. Yeah, we are all somehow related. That's this text, this original text, and now we're going to look at the Torah in sort of a historical move. So
Rabbi?
Yeah, who's that?
That's Stephen.
Okay.
I actually see this text as humans are going to dominate the earth. That's pretty much what this text is all about.
One could absolutely see that. That's not what we're using it for tonight, but you could absolutely see that.
And also take responsibility for it.
Absolutely. But in a discussion about how we form political bonds, the reason we brought this text, I'm saying absolutely yes to what you're saying. And that's not why we brought the text. We brought the text here tonight to say that, yeah, you know what? We are all somehow individuals, but that we're all also children of God. Everyone. I am the Indian, the Pakistani, even though they may hate each other, they too are children of God. created by God. The Palestinian, the Shia, the Sunni, they're all individuals. And so one could have an individual relationship. Okay, let's go to the next text. But you're right. Yes, we're going to dominate the world. Hopefully care for it as well. We're not doing such a good job at that. Yeah, Eleni, are you reading or are you talking?
Quick comment if it's okay
Great.
with you.
Of course.
So I think it's really interesting and kind of wonderful to put the biblical text side by side with these definitions. It's more like a meta comment because it's an opportunity to see the various narratives that feed into our experience and our feelings about our experience, which is then a little bit separate from maybe where we land after we really chew this over a bit and then assess, how that expresses itself in this particular moment. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does to me. And what I would say is the reason we're reading these sources and rather quickly, not in depth at all and with no commentary, but it's to really take us to a place of what are our stories? What's the story of the Jewish people that got us to a place of Jewish nationhood? What are our stories that moved us so that in the 1800s, groups of people got together and said this ragtag people that has been running around the earth somewhat persecuted decided that they would form themselves into a nation state. These are our, and this is not about, I'm not looking to the Bible to see, I have a claim on the land, not at all. That's not why we're looking at these texts. These texts right now are about where did our identity come from? And we can also all, question that and say, I don't agree with it.
It's giving us a language to talk about it, but these texts and the definitions. And so it's really interesting to see how the definitions diverge or come together.
Yes. Okay. So 3. I love 3. Lo tov liot adam levado. Wait, Lucy, do you have your hand up? Yeah. Did you want to read or say something? But you're on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got on a little late and I'm lost. I don't know where you are. I can't find the reading. Are we in 5 or 6?
We're in 5. We're on reading number 3. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for being here. Maura Ellen, you want to read number 3? But unmute.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I will. The
I call her
Lord,
Maura Ellen because she's really one of our excellent religious school teachers at every age and stage.
yes. The Lord God said, "It is not good for man to be alone. I will make a fitting helper for him." And the Lord God formed out of the earth all the wild beasts and all the birds of the sky, and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called each living creature, that would be its name.
Okay, we're going to stop there because actually the reason we want this text is to think about what are our responsibilities in the world and who encumbers us. Again, that word that you hear at Hartman a little bit, and it's akin to the word obligates us. Who are we obligated to in the world? Am I just obligated to myself? And the Jewish story says some people in life have family. Your family could be your sibling, and you're obligated to your sibling. Your family could be your child. Your family could be these are the spheres of who you feel encumbered by, who you feel obligated to. And I'll say it in the heteronormative patriarchal language of the Torah, this relationship, that first relationship that you're obligated to is your spouse. But we could expand that and say, who are you obligated to? And that could be your nuclear family. And let's say you have a nuclear family, but then your child goes off and marries someone else. Is your child's first responsibility to you as the parent or to their child?
Child.
Well, I don't know. Depends. I mean, I would say Kohelet, there's a time for everything. When your child needs you, yes, your child. And there's a time when your parent needs you, that yes, your parent. What the Torah here is showing us is that we have specific relationships. It's not just that everyone is in the world. So I am equally worried about everyone in the world. Hazel Sticks is going to worry about the Sticks family before she worries about the Richmond family. Then she'll worry about the Richmond family. Even if I care deeply about another family, don't you usually care more about your family? About your child or your parent? Okay.
I have a comment, just what
Yeah.
I realize now, and in a way it makes me think about the responsibilities that you were talking before, that before he brought the Ezer Kenegdo, he gave the Adam the responsibility to name names, of what he choose to name. And when we think about this process, this is itself has a lot of responsibility, morally and individually, okay? And it's interesting that only later on, he brings the help, kind of the partner. So I feel that there is a premise here that our responsibility, it's not just to the help that was given us while we were asleep, the Adam, but even before that.
Are you saying, I want to understand, make sure I understand that we have individual responsibilities like Adam Rishon, like that first person had?
Yes, because he got the responsibility to name things.
Yeah.
Even before.
Right. And then his responsibility is enlarged when there's a dyad, when there's two of them together. And for those of you who are in relationships, whether it's marriage or other kind of relationships, you have obligations to the people in that relationship. Okay. And that we see in Genesis 4. The man knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain, gained a male child. Why are you distressed? Cain said to his brother Abel, and when they were in the field, Cain sat upon Abel and killed him. And the Lord said to Cain, where is your brother Abel? And what's the famous line of the Torah?
My
brother's keeper.
Right. So what's the answer according to Jewish tradition?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Now, what's interesting about this text is it's actually the brother. His actual brother. Or maybe not. Maybe we're supposed to see it in the metaphoric way that so many of us see it today. Maybe our brother is all of humanity. Maybe our brother is anywhere that there's someone in need. If we're all children of God, I'm sort of putting that out as a possibility, while at the same time saying, we as human beings gather ourselves into groups. We know that in one big story called the Tower of Babel. What was the Tower of Babel about?
Trying to reach the heavens and changing the languages to many different varieties. That they were trying to read, the fear that they were trying to reach heaven and be with God or like God.
Yeah, and also that they were fighting among themselves. They had grouped. The Tower of Babel is that nobody could understand each other because they all spoke different languages. We have, in some ways, and this maybe an anthropologist or sociologist can talk to us, or a historian, we group ourselves in the world. So we, the people on this Zoom, have grouped ourselves as part of the Jewish people. Many of us have grouped ourselves also as Americans, but there's probably a lot of other groupings you find yourself in. Maybe it's your political party, maybe it's your profession. I don't know, maybe it's and avocation, we group ourselves. This next text, text number 5, there's a flood. There's going to be a flood. And the person who's chosen, Noah, whose name literally means rest, right? Then the Lord said to Noah, go into the ark with all your household, for you alone have I found righteousness before me in this generation. But God doesn't mean just Noah. Who does God mean Noah should take on the ark? Not the animals. Who else?
His family.
Yeah, his whole family. That's the unit we care about first. By the way, today, we know that language, you know that language, right? Because so many people in modern culture will say, well, there's the family you're born into, and what else?
Family you choose to be with?
Yeah, the family you choose, not just choose to be with, but your friends. We put ourselves into categories. I am going fast to number 7. With the Jewish people throughout the Bible become larger and thus in smaller, different kinds of groups. Now, in this text on number 7, we have the Reubenites and the Gadites. And they're not going to settle in the same place as the other tribes. They're going to be a little bit different. This text reminds us that we have similarities and things that bring us together, but also they were different. The Reubenites and the Gadites, they settled on lands near each other. Okay? Text number 8, you shall not hate your kinfolk in your heart. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against your countrymen. Love your fellow as yourself. So we've gone to, you can have a family, but it's not just your family you're encumbered by and responsible to. It's all who dwell in your country. And guess what? The Torah is going to say, it's not just those who dwell in your country who are like you, but let's read verse 33. This one seems pretty important. Can someone volunteer to read verse 33 on the text 8?
I'll read it.
Thank you, Jane LaGrange.
When a stranger resides with you in your land, you shall not wrong him. The stranger who resides with you shall be to you as one of your citizens. You shall love him as yourself, for you are strangers in the land of Egypt. I, the Lord, am your God.
Okay. What does this say about how we relate to people who are not us, but who are part of our country?
You have to treat them decently. Treat them like you would want to be treated.
Treat them decently. What else can you learn from this text?
Like have a form of affection for them.
Yeah.
That's what I get. Even if you don't want to. It's not easy.
Right, but so also the converse is true, that you're allowed to recognize that there's an other. The Torah recognizes that even within us, we can still love someone and there can be difference. They can be not my family, not my tribe, not my people, not the Jewish people, and I can still love them. But I know that they're not me.
It says more than that even, that is in our words today to translate to nowadays language, that is a citizen like us and we should respect them and not to mislead him even in the eyes of the law. So, because he says like Ezrach.
Yep. Is exactly the word for citizen today.
Yeah.
So when we think about our nation, we can have nation states, even if we go back to our founding document, not the document Declaration of Independence, I mean the real founding document, the Torah, that the Torah sees and knows that you're going to have people who live with you, who are part of you, who are not you. And you love them and you give them citizenship and they're still not you. And that's okay. I think it's actually quite a more interesting question of how you become part of the American people, right? Because that's really that whole melting pot, not salad bowl analogy. Judy, did you have something you wanted to say?
I'm just going to say that there's also this mega reminder that we were strangers in Egypt, and to remember what that felt like, well, what we're told it felt like, to remember that so we don't do it to someone else. So that's putting like a major responsibility from our history on what we do as in the present.
So when you think of nationalism today, we're going to go back out. The Talmud text is beautiful, but it kind of states the same idea that there are those that we have responsibilities to, and that can be part of our nation state that are not us. So now, when we think about the ideas of nationalism, the title of this chapter is Nationalism and Ultranationalism, and even Fascism. What do you think are the differences in Israeli culture between nationalism, ultranationalism, and fascism? And this is not a right, the wrong. This is remember, I chose this to teach in July, not recently. So why do you feel comfortable with nationalism? I mean, I certainly feel comfortable with nationalism. Why would you feel comfortable with having a sense of Jewish nationalism? What did we say it solved for us in the 1880s when Pinsker wrote Auto Emancipation and Herzl wrote The Jewish State? What does nationalism do for us?
It gives us an identity and a state.
And what does that do for the Jewish people, Moshe?
It gives them roots.
Roots, and keep going. What else does it do?
Brings us together.
Common purpose.
And also equality in the, if I mix your globalism, because if we have our own nationality, we have also equality as citizens of the world, because we have our own system.
But it gives us response.
If we're going to talk about Jewish nationalism and related back to Herzl, I think you have to look at the context.
Right.
Herzl was Hungarian, and he believed he was Hungarian before he was Jewish, until he realized that wasn't the case. And he was a reporter in France. He covered the Dreyfus trial, and that changed his whole outlook on who he was. And from that, he created Jewish nationalism, which he hoped would lead to a state.
As a response to the problem of anti-Semitism.
Right. Absolutely.
As a response to the problem, and nationalism could solve it. But nationalism, so we talked about civic nationalism at the beginning of the class. Bob Karp, you're next. I got you. I see you. Civic nationalism would solve the problem of Jews being persecuted. And in fact, we then would say the Hebrew word is a miklat, a shelter, which today means maybe something else. But really, in early Zionism, miklat was that the state of Israel would be the shelter for the troubled people that were all over the world. The problem came when we got to ultranationalism. But before we get to ultranationalism, we're going to get to Bob Karp.
We're going to get one.
Bob Karp? He had his hand raised. Oh, but you are on mute, Dr.
Yeah.
Karp.
Well, actually, Bob down on my left picked up on what I was going to say. I'll just add a few things. We're speaking in the 20th, 21st century, post-Dreyfus in the West and the various pogroms in the East, because up till then, and even after, among perhaps a majority of the Jews, anti-Zionism was forbidden. Zionism, I'm sorry, anti-Zionism was predominant, and Zionism was forbidden. And it was the recognition that racial anti-Semitism made any kind of an assimilation and still maintaining Jewish identity, or even rejecting Jewish identity, impossible. So, but we're speaking in the present tense without an awareness, without until what Bob spoke, awareness of how unusual it was to be a political Zionist. Oh, go live in. You're sure you'd go live in Palestine, perhaps, when you're old and praying, but not what we see today.
Well, that's what we're talking about. The birth of the nationalism for the Jewish people came in the milieu of nationalisms being formed all over the world, right?
Right.
Zionism doesn't come without the French Revolution. Zionism doesn't come without a group of people forming a country far away because they had religious persecution in England, right? So nationalism happens for the Jewish people as a result of nationalism in the world. And
Yeah.
coming together of there being that sense of anti-Semitism as well. Okay, so what then is ultranationalism?
Do you mean ultra nationalism? You refer to Chok HaLeom, like the law of the
Yeah, so what I do mean that. We want to explain what that means?
Wow, it's so complicated, but very briefly, that as a matter of fact, when we are talking about nationalism as the state of Israel, we define it as we refer to the Jewish nation and not to the others, not to the minority. And this will be an extreme version of the law of nationality.
Right. So what
Which in
happens?
this war, just in parentheses, as you know, made for instance, the Druze very angry, or the Bedouin, or people who, fought and are fighting and take part of what's going on in the state of Israel, that they are not included. It's not inclusive, in short. It's focusing on the Jewish identity and not others.
Right. So in the founding fathers and mothers of the Jewish state, there was nationalism. There was the desire to have a state. And there was a recognition in the Declaration of Independence that we wouldn't all be Jews. And then in the last several years,
2018
law that just came about, although it was codified in 2018, it's been certainly talked about, like the parties that have this sense of ultranationalism are taking what many of the Zionist thinkers were, oh, we're going to have this balanced kind of way of living nationalism. And
I
the
don't
same thing,
understand.
right?
I
The
don't
same thing.
understand what you mean by ultranationalism in this case.
So we'll explain. I'll
In
explain
terms of
again.
Israel, I mean,
Yes.
ultranationalism to me means rivalry, competition.
So
between nations. But I don't see that
ultranationalism.
with Israel.
Okay, so Hazel, I'll explain it, but I'm going to explain it in terms of the United States and then throw it back on Israel. I'll use the United States as an example.
Yeah, when you have the United States, you have China vying with each
No,
other.
no,
you
no.
have
Listen,
Russia.
listen. Ultranationalism in this context are folks who believe that only their ethnic form is the way to be, and they're the ones who have rights. So that would be when someone in the United States gets up in Congress and makes a statement that, well, we are a Christian country, so we shouldn't allow a health procedure for women.
I wouldn't call that ultranationalism, but
we do.
That's your definition. I was thinking of it as nation versus nation.
No, but this is within the nation, when you are using one set of your own subgroup to define how every subgroup should be. In Israel, it's saying ultranationalism in Israel, where Israel sort of fell off the rails in the last 8 years, although more, because it grew out of somewhere, were folks who said only Jews should live here. That's not what it says in the Declaration of Independence of Israel. The Declaration of Independence, it says we are a civic nationalism. and ethnic nationalism, but there are other subgroups here, just like in the United States. So we have nationalism, the desire to have a state, nation state for your people. And then you have ultranationalism, which creeps over, God forbid, into fascism. And that's sadly, something that none of us want. I don't want a fascist country in the United States. Do you?
No. I think the greatest example of ultranationalism was Nazi Germany. If you were not an Aryan and you didn't belong, that's what created the Nazis, ultranationalism. If you were Jewish or a gypsy or
well, that's not even ultranational. That goes one step further into fascism.
It's fascism.
Fascism. And what we're, I guess, trying to grapple with is what it means for countries, both the United States and all the countries in Europe over the last 10 years, and Israel, to think about what is the definition, what's that interplay between nationalism and that law that happened in 2018 that most of you are embarrassed by. The law that Edna was talking about. But the same conversations are going on in the United States. Where does our nationalism stop and become ultranationalism, where we're not being good to other peoples, and then where are we gone way too far into fascism? That is a conversation or a thought that we can think about when we think about what it means to be part of the Jewish nation. I don't know about you, but I want a strong nationalism. I don't want ultranationalism, and I don't want, as a Jew, and I don't want fascism. I would say that for my allegiances in the United States as well. I am going to stop here and ask if anyone has things to say. And add one more thing, which is, yes, we are all walking this tightrope of, I care first about my child, I care next about my parent, I care next about my sibling, I care next about, oh, here's the 5 Jews I went to high school with and everyone else who went there. I care next about my community. Then my community gets larger. Then it gets larger. I care about the Jewish people. And I still care about those who are not part of the Jewish people. And I still care about those who are not citizens of the United States. I just care more about my people. And I put my people first. And that's hard. And each of us has that balance. Okay, we're going to do one round of comments before I go and take the dog for a walk.
Rabbi, Ron has a comment.
Ron, Laura's brother, and then Sally.
I love being identified that way.
Us too, I'm sure.
It's interesting that this conversation is really much easier for me personally, thinking about the United States, in that we know there are those in the United States now who are very upset that the demographics are changing. And the United States that they imagine or they wish we were going to be, we hear how in a certain number of years, the white Christian will no longer be a majority or something like that.
That's right.
And that's very upsetting and disturbing to them. And that may be fine with me. In Israel.
By the way, Ron, it may not only be fine with you, for me, it's better.
Okay, right.
Because I'm less othered if the white Christians aren't the majority, then the Jews are less othered.
But the problem I have, and maybe you might have too, is that Israel as a democracy, and everybody gets to vote as citizens, and majority rules. And as they vote in laws can be voted, and they're, what are they, I guess they're called, is it basic laws? Is that the word that's used? The real fundamental laws.
Yeah. Since
they don't have a constitution, these basic laws, they can be put in place by much less than a majority. It's not, I'm not even sure what it's some very low quorum numbers almost have put things into place, that the concept of the Jewish state could change significantly because the changing of demographics. And that's more troublesome in my mind, even though I like the idea of Israel being a functioning democracy.
Yeah, I agree that you are correct. And that is actually when the people were out at Kaplan, which I wish that there were no hostages and people could be out criticizing the government and not calling for the release of hostages. Oh, how I wish we could go back to October 6th. That is what they were saying. That was exactly their argument, that just because someone votes it in doesn't mean it's democratic or moral. So yeah, we were at that place in Israel. So we're going to Sally and then Eleni. And this is a really interesting conversation, so thank you all for sticking with it. Sally.
One of the things that has troubled me about Trump is his saying something like America first. And, you know, I liked what you had to say because it resonates with me about, you know, your love for different people and you don't love everyone equally. On the other hand, what constitutes a democracy to me is majority rules, yes, but with the protection of the minority. And that's what our goal needs to be.
Right. And Sally, there's one added piece that we have as Americans that we're grateful for, which is a judiciary which can go and declare a law immoral. And that is what the folks in Israel want to make sure they continue to be able to have.
Right.
Okay, we're going to go to Eleni, then Edna, and then I'm going to go back to Hanukkah because we're about to start Hanukkah.
Yeah, thanks, Rabbi. So I'm really wrestling with some of this, and I appreciated what Sally just said because it really is a tie-in. When we talk about the sort of hierarchy that we care about ourselves first, and we need to care about ourselves first, and then there's this hierarchy that goes out. But what I really struggle with is or reflect on and sort of wrestle with is that it's in my moral interest to care about others as much as I care about myself on some very deep moral,
but
just the way I think about it. If I don't care about the other, I don't want to make this false dichotomy. Like, yes, if I'm in the airplane, I must put my own mask on first. Yes, there are situations where that hierarchy is strict, but in a political situation, we're trying to figure out how to get the most good for the most people, and that somehow thinking only of myself as a priority bumps up against that. So I'm not.
So I don't.
I'm trying to put into words something that feels
that makes you feel uncomfortable.
Well, that feels complicated, and I think it's over simplistic in my view to be satisfied with that strict hierarchy.
There's not going to ever be a strict hierarchy when you're in a nation state that has multiple ethnicities, but one primary one. And I think what we're all, and we all grapple with is, look, the biggest issue here, I don't need to talk about Israel, and I don't need to talk about the United States per se, but I can talk about immigration anywhere. The United States immigration policy today brings up the exact questions that we're asking. And I'm not going to give away what my politics are, because I'm also, like all of you, probably still grappling with it. But some of us, I would say most of us were immigrants here, or if we're not immigrants, we knew the generation that was the immigrant here. And we are battling immigration policy right now. Who gets to be part of this nation? It is not simple. You are correct. It is not simple. But what the takeaways for us to think about vis-a-vis Israel, which is what the course is about, I engage, is to think about how complicated it is to have this nation state born out of nationalism, which is a good thing. Nationalism we think is good. And then what we see is nationalism when it goes too far then it becomes not a good thing. So I'm Edna Oderad. Okay.
A question,
Yeah.
even though we don't have the time probably to get an answer, but it's a thought that I wanted to ask you. Do you believe or do you have any insight that if and when we'll reach to a point that we'll be able to separate in Israel state and religion, right?
Inshallah.
Excuse me? Yes, you're okay, for many reasons, but I mean to the national laws that Israel is a nation state of the Jewish people as it was passed in 2018, which is, in my eyes, it's a bad basic law, that if we had the separation, then people won't need or wish to push to this kind of basic laws.
So I would say that I think our conversation right now we're having between the two of us, and I apologize if we're not explaining enough, but I agree that if we had a constitution in Israel, I think many people agree that if there was a constitution, and if that constitution had some separation of having religion not be mandated by the state, even though it would be a Jewish state, but not have the religious practices and money from it mandated by the state, it would be a much healthier sense of nationalism. That's my own personal sense.
Yeah, okay.
Right now, we experience such
How
right?
can you make it a Jewish state, which is the homeland of the Jews if they need it, and not have a religion? I mean, I
You
think
can
it's
have religion.
I didn't say no religion. You
We
can
didn't say no religion.
the law, you can still keep the law of return. You can still keep the foundation of the idea of building a Jewish nation.
But you don't have
without
one
having a religious color.
But you don't have one small percentage of Jews deciding what Judaism is
Oh,
for
well,
everyone.
that I agree. So
That's what we're talking about. When you have the separation of in Israel, separation of that kind of Judaism with this law means that I or Edna or
Be
anyone else in
independent,
Israel
yeah.
would be able to practice Judaism in a way that we feel is authentic. I
Mhm.
actually feel that the way those folks don't count women in the minyan is not authentic. That is not what the Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, wants from all of us. That's what I think. That's how I practice. But I don't want to mandate my view for someone else in the same way. I
Right.
don't want them to mandate it for the rest of the Jews.
Mhm.
I want to stop here, and I want to I know there's more people want to talk, but just want to give you a quick 1-2 about what's happening in the next few nights. At 5 p.m., I will be on Thursday night on Nassau Street with long johns on or whatever I need to be able to wear to stand outside. And I will light with you a Hanukkah menorah. I hope you will be there. At this Thursday night on Nassau Street at TJC on our property. At 7
What time, Rabbi?
5 p.m.
5 o'clock. Okay.
5 o'clock this Thursday. We'll light on Nassau Street. This is something I keep saying about the Jewish Center. I want us to be loud and proud. I want our sign to be bigger. I want us to say, this is where the Jews are. But we will have that beautiful, beautiful Chanukiah that you guys have had for many years. We're going to light it at 5. But then I want you to run home and eat dinner at home so that you can get online at 7 and be part of the community candle lighting run by Federation in solidarity with Israel. That's at 7, from 7 to 7:30. Then I'm getting off and I'm running to go teach the community conversion class. So I'll only be there till 7:20, so I can go teach conversion class on a different Zoom. Friday night, for those who are not Suzanne Esterman and her sons, we invite the rest of you to be at the Jewish Center for Shabbat dinner. We have our musicians coming. We're going to have a rockin' musical Shabbat at 6:30 with me and Avi and all of you. If you have a tambourine, bring it. If you have some drums, you can bring it. Be part of the crew. And make sure you sign up for Shabbat dinner. Make something really yummy. I think we're definitely having salmon. We're definitely having latkes. Then we're having whatever else you bring. Saturday night, we have well over 100 people signed up already for Hanukkah Jewish Games Night. Saturday night. It's just a fun night, but we need you to sign up because we're ordering food, we're ordering falafel, we're ordering latkes, we're ordering all kinds of stuff. I heard there's going to be a poker tournament. There's going to be backgammon and chess. There's going to be a truck in our parking lot that has video games for children. So that's where I will be playing. I hope they have a Pac-Man. I might even bring Cards Against Humanity. We'll see. So that is to celebrate Hanukkah. There's going to be Hanukkah singing, and there's over 100 people coming already. We hope many more will come. So that is Saturday night. Sunday night, Monday night, you're in your own. Tuesday night next week at 4 o'clock, I will be with Avi, with you, with every other person you know. Oh, right, it's latkes and vodkas. With every other person you know, hopefully in Palmer Square. But in order to keep it safe, at 3 p.m., Palmer Square will be blocked off to traffic. You'll still be able to get into the parking lots in the area, but you're going to have to walk into Palmer Square. We're going to have gelt, Hanukkah gelt, and other kinds of stuff. And I have musicians, 3 musicians coming, and we're going to have a good time lighting candles with the mayor, with the police chief, with the head of the the clergy association. So one of the pastors will be there, all to celebrate with us. And that's Tuesday. That means we'll be there till 6. And then we're going to run home, and we decided we'll do this class on Zoom, where we're going to read about the IDF's rules of Tahor HaNeshek, some light reading for you next week, which you already have, some light reading, Tahor HaNeshek, purity of arms. And then next Wednesday night, the men's club is sponsoring Torah on Tap at a local bar. I don't know which one. And I'm the guest speaker, so come and have a beer with me. That's all I got.
Wow, that's
Hanukkah Sameach.
Thank you.
And thank you to Suzanne for being our incredible Zoom person.
Thanks. I have new ears for Hanukkah and they light up.
I do too.
Yeah, I heard you got a pair.
Yeah. Okay. So everyone have a wonderful, not Shabbos, have a wonderful Hanukkah. Chag Urim Sameach. You got to bring the light this week.